Hello, I'm Karen. I'm with PhotoShelter, and today we're going to talk about improving website and image visibility using SEO. Welcome. So here's an overview of what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about workflow and best practices for metadata, SEO concepts, and off-page SEO factors. What we will not be covering is SEO strategy, Bing and Yahoo specific SEO, and paid advertising. Here is a list of a few definitions that I'm going to explain pretty quickly so that you'll understand some of the content that we're talking about. A search engine, which you're already familiar with. It's a website through which users can search internet content. And query processor. A query processor is the search bar when you type in the search. Bots and crawlers. Bots and crawlers are basically, it's a web crawler. They sometimes call it a spider. And it crawls the internet and browses the World Wide Web and it indexes websites. So when somebody does a search on Google, that's how your website's found, because this crawler has come across your website and pulled that content for searchability. Indexing is also what the crawlers do. They'll go through and they will index your site. And algorithms. Ranking algorithm is pretty involved, so we're not going to talk about that, but that is how your site gets ranked through Google. I can't really offer strategy on that, but that is what this means. Local algorithms, a little bit more related to what we're talking about. And that's like when you look for a business and you see the business listing on the right-hand side through Google search. It's local algorithm is used to rank results based on relevance, proximity, and prominence. So that's more related to that. By the way, I work for PhotoShelter, as I mentioned before. We have a really great SEO checklist on our website. It is specific to PhotoShelter, but a large majority of it applies just generally for SEO. You can find it at support.photoshelter.com. And also remember, through our discussion here, is that SEO is a moving target and requires continued work. Google constantly changes the algorithms. There are continuous updates, and there's always improvements to be made on your website. So workflow. As a best practice, as part of your workflow, you should be adding IPTC in your editing program before uploading to PhotoShelter or any other program you're using, whether it's WordPress or Wix, anything like that. Lightroom, Photoshop, Capture One, and Photo Mechanic all have templates to speed up your IPTC inputting. Why do we do this? Although you can edit your IPTC within PhotoShelter and other websites, it's better to have your IPTC in the original files. So whenever you upload or share your images, you won't have to do it again. What is IPTC? The information interchange model is a file structure and set of metadata attributes that can be applied to text, images, and other media types. It was developed in the early 1990s by the International Press Telecommunications Council to expedite the international exchange of news among newspapers and news agencies. So this is relative to the IPTC field when you're looking in Lightroom or Photoshop. The fields that are relevant are headline, description, caption, title, keywords, author, credit provider, copyright, and two new fields, web statement URL and licensor URL. We'll talk about those later. But if you notice, that language is all relative to journalism, and that's why the language is that. These fields are all relevant for searchability on Google, and it is recommended to fill all of these out within your IPTC. Here is an example of where the IPTC is in Lightroom. There's a little drop down there that also allows you to change to IPTC extension. There are a few fields in there that are being used. Some of this stuff may not be relevant for you. It isn't relevant for SEO, but it might be relevant for cataloging purposes. So one of the fields in IPTC is keywords, and this is where people get hung up a lot. You want to think about what you would want someone to search for to find your site, and take that theory to Google. Use this to help inform what words or phrases you are ultimately going to select. So if you look in this little animation we have here, if you type in the word corporate stock photography, somebody might be looking for corporate stock photography, but maybe they want it specific to New York City. Maybe they want it specific to San Francisco. So relevancy is really important for that. So if you're a shooter in Houston, you want to make sure that you add that as part of your phrases. Keywords can be single words or phrases, but phrases are definitely more helpful because they're more descriptive. Because if you're going to do a Google search for a photographer in New York, you're going to type in photographer in New York. You're not just going to type in photographer because that's too broad of a search. So the more concise it is, the better results you're going to get from people trying to locate your images and your website. You also want to make sure in the keyword section in your IPTC, you want to use at least 5 keywords per image. The quantity is not as important, but the quality is important and accuracy is important. Make sure you use a comma and a space between each, but also remember if it's like corporate photographer, New York, don't put the comma because that means it's a separator and it's seeing as 2 separate phrases. So if it's an entire string of words, you want to separate that by a comma. Alt text. This might be a phrase you've heard before, alt text or alt attribute. It is a complete HTML tag. So if you look at that example, this is a script that's used, it's a command for your content on a web page. So IMGSRC is referring to the image itself, and the alt tag is a description of what that is. This is different than the captions. It depends how the site's being used and what content's being pulled, but it's very helpful for screen readers, which are browsed by blind and visually impaired people. The screen readers tell them what's on the image by reading the alt tag. The title attribute is shown as a tooltip when you hover over the image itself. And each image you have should have an alt text. It's not just for SEO, but because of blind and visually impaired people won't know what the image is about. The title attribute is not required. And you can see an alt tag if you go into Instagram there and you go to edit the image, there is an option for alt tag, and that tells people what is going on with that image. This is an example within PhotoShelter of all of the relevant IPTC fields filled out. It's going to look different from each company, but this is basically all of the important content you want to have for SEO relevance. Description and caption. So PhotoShelter uses the description caption as the alt text. And if we look back at the description and caption here, the description and caption is a little bit more in depth about the image than the headline or the title. So the title could be like photograph of saxophonist, but the headline is this band, which is Too Many Zoos, plays at the Independent in San Francisco. So the headline is going to be what's happening. The title is kind of like, it can be like an artsy description of an image. You could and again, you could put whatever you want in there, but in the form of photojournalism, this is kind of the standard. The important part is that you have variations in what this is, so that for searchability, we're hoping that it will catch whatever somebody's typing. So you want to consider who, what, when, where, and why of what is in the image when you're adding in the description and the caption. And be sure don't use those fields for keywords. You can use keywords in a sentence, like a fluid written sentence, but keywords should be used only in the keyword section, and the writing should be geared towards a human person that's reading it and not a bot or a crawler. This is an example of what the code markup looks like from a page and where it's hidden. There's times where you might look at a page and the images has the content from IPTC in there and it's not visible, but it is actually in the website. There are 2 new Google fields that have just come out. I think PhotoShelter was the first one to have it. And the 2 fields are web statement URL and licensor URL. The web statement URL is a link referencing a page about your licensing terms for the image. That could be on the company that you work with. In PhotoShelter, we have our own licensing terms, which people are welcome to use, or you can create your own, copy it, put it on a custom page and use that, and then reference that link in your IPTC. The licensor URL is how you would contact the person. Typically, that's what that is. So that would be leading to the contact page. This is a really great addition that they've put in there. So when people are, clients, whomever is trying to find an image, it shows up on the right-hand panel with this information, which is clickable. So those links need to have the entire HTTPS, at least for us. I'm not sure how other companies work, but the idea is that that link is clickable and it's easy for visitors to make it to your website to find that image and contact you and look at your licensing terms. This is an example of what how Google uses the IPTC. If you look to the right, that is, I can't remember if that's the title or the headline. And then you can see underneath the creator is my name, the credit is me, the copyright is me, and it says information extracted from IPTC. And then we can look at examples of the same search that I did for this band, and not really great examples. It's a little small, but you can see that the first one has no information besides the caption. The second one, the creator is the file name, which shouldn't be in there. And then the copyright is the photographer. There's not a full amount of SEO in there. And then the third one down is just a bunch of file names and random numbers, which is probably part of the cataloging system that the photographer used, but it's not helpful for searchability, and it's not helpful for somebody wanting to know who shot the image so that they can license it. So knowing your audience. When people are trying to find you, what would you like people to search for in Google or other search engines to land on your website's homepage? Who are your competitors in the field that you're working in? So for me, for concert photography, you could be doing portraiture, weddings. How do they write for their target audience? Are you aware of the competition in your market? If they're successful, how can you distinguish yourself from your competition while taking into account the way they speak to their audience and applying that to your own business? It'll take some planning, but ask around your circles for their opinions on which options they like best if you're torn between two options. So you want to, one of the things that I did is I did the search for Northern California concert photographer. And then I looked at all of the stuff that came up, and I went through the websites trying to understand why one person would have a ranking this way and one person would be, on the third page, but maybe they have better content. There's a bunch of different factors in that, but looking at your competitors to see why they're top of the search, it could be that maybe they just have a Google business page and you don't. That could be part of it. And how are they writing? Potentially the writing that they're using has a lot of language in there that's making them more visible through searching. And what can you do to distinguish yourself from the competition? How you write about yourself is really important. A website that just says, I'm a portrait photographer located here, doesn't really tell them, the visitors to your site, what your passion is, why are you different, something that sets you apart from them. So what other sites, forums, and modes of social media are your clients spending their time on? So distinguishing yourself could be through Facebook. It could be for Pinterest, places like that. And then you want to use the information from defining your audience to guide you on your word choice throughout the website. So why is the content different in one place than another? Why is, when you do a search on, say, Pinterest for, photographer in Texas, different than what's coming up on Google? And what audience are you looking for? Pinterest is used a lot for wedding and family portraiture and stuff like that. So the audience is completely different. What makes it better to find that content on there than it would be somewhere else? And what is your market? Is that what you want? You want to also keep in mind specifically that search engines tailor results to your geographic location. So be sure to add that information into the language that you're using. Custom pages. Every website has a way for you to make like a blank page with information on it. When making content for your pages, you want to think about who's your reader, why do they care? Is the information written in a fresh, unique way, written for the reader and not Google? So again, you want to use fluid language that is not a bunch of keywords. The keywords, you want to use language that's important, but not a list of words, and you just don't want a list. And you're speaking to the audience as a well-informed photographer. Why are you good at what you do? So on and so forth. But the language that you're using is something you want to check on Google. Do a Google search for that language and see what comes up. That's going to tell you what's going to be great to use, or what's going to be more accurate for you to use for searchability. Google evaluates word count, grammar accuracy, among other things. The more niche you can get, the easier it is to rank higher in search results for that. So this helps build organic traffic. So you want to word count. You don't want to stuff a lot of. You don't want to overdo it, because you want to hold the attention of the viewers. So writing 3 pages of how you learn photography isn't really ideal. You want to make it brief to catch to hold their interest. You want to make sure your grammar is good and everything is accurate. And if you have a specialty, you want to make sure that you're adding that in there. We have a few tintype photographers. It's a specialty. You want to make sure that you add that in there as into your custom pages, whether it be pricing pages, what have you. You want to use that kind of content. So custom pages allow your site to be more crawlable because you're providing text and content, text and context to search engines to inform what the rest of your website's about. So PhotoShelter has unlimited pages. I don't know that that's unique to PhotoShelter, but what's important about those pages is that it has a page title and meta description. The page title tells people what the page is, like about page or pricing page. And the meta description is a short brief about what that page is. So about Karen, and then the description would be Karen's a photographer and blah, blah, blah. It's sort of like a bio, but it's very, very brief. So with custom pages, there's some different things you could do with custom pages. You could have a prints and products page, pricing, testimonials, awards, a clients page, press, affiliates, tear sheets. They're all very useful. And adding word content in there that is geared for searchability and language that people are using to use the search engines is going to be helpful in having it visible. With custom pages, I don't know if it's standard for other sites to include the title on the page. We call it the header, permanent or not, but using an H1 font per page is something you want to have. You don't want to use more than one H1 font because that's a command in the code, and that is used for searchability. So you don't want to have more than one of those. So using that as a centered title at the top of the page, like it says about me, using this header font is what you want. It's not really a font, it's called a header, but you want that as kind of the title for the page. Searchability attributes. So PhotoShelter, among other companies, there is an option to make your images searchable or not searchable. If they're not searchable, that means Google can't find them. But also, if there's no, even if your images are searchable and there's no content, that's not going to make your images be found. So both of those things are important. You want to have good IPTC, and you also want to have searchability turned on in whatever form that looks like. Page titles and metadata. We briefly talked about that. The page title for us pulls from the IPTC headline. It is different for every company, but at the top you can see on the left, Lisa Loeb backstage, Jacob Dillon. That tells people in there what that page is. Each page is a little bit different, but Google overall, it varies between each company where they're pulling it from, but the same, it should have a brief description of the page. It can just be 2 words, 3 words, but it's telling your audience what the page is. It's also helpful for searchability. And then Google recommends 70 or fewer characters. When there's too many characters on a page, the content tends to get lost. It's not as helpful for searching, or for searchability, pardon me. So the meta description part of the page is, if you look on the left, that's what it looks like in PhotoShelter. But the meta description, you can see up to the right where it says Marie Frey. The page would be Marie Frey, and then the meta description is what's below. You've probably seen this when you've done search results, when you've done searches before. And it will often show below to the page link. For the best results on all devices, you want to keep these descriptions to 160 or fewer characters. And depending on the way the site is laid out on your provider, this can vary about how much content you want or what's recommended. Generally, you want to have pretty brief descriptions. It's better for the search engines, and it's also to hold your clients' attention or visitors to your site. Submitting your sitemap to Google. If you want to track what content is indexed by Google and manually request Google to crawl certain URLs, you want to submit your sitemap to Google Search Console. We have a sitemap. We have a good article on submitting your sitemap specific to PhotoShelter. It has some good content in there, but Google also has its own pages for that. So after you've set up your Google console, this is what it looks like. You submitted your sitemap. So this will crawl your site. Google crawls your site when it wants. It will stumble across certain pages. And the point of the sitemap is Google sees this, it knows there's more pages, it'll continue crawling. It doesn't mean it's going to find all the pages. So there may be some pages that are really, really chock full of SEO and you want that to be crawled. So you can ask, you can make a request. We're not going to call it, we're not going to say that you can, because Google takes its time in crawling. Sometimes it's immediate, sometimes it's later. So you can submit what's called a sitemap. And this is usually a good practice if you've made a bunch of changes to your website that would make it more relevant for people searching, like you've added new images, you've updated your IPTC, all of those things. And this tells you basically the traffic to your website. It's pretty helpful to use. It's pretty helpful to have, but it forces a search. I said before, when it feels like it, but it puts you in the queue for searching. Backlinking. A backlink is a link on another site that leads to a page on your site. Search engine algorithms favor websites that are linked to by other reputable sites. This is critical if you want to increase your search engine performance. So quality backlinking would be like, say Petapixel. Say you have a unique photography process that you're doing and you want to share that with Petapixel. You tell Petapixel, hey, this is my site. Can you feature me? Maybe you write something up for them. Maybe they write something about you, but they're going to have a link to your website from there. That's a really good quality backlink. And then what you would do on your website is you're putting a link back to that page. That's kind of like, I call it a handshake. Google sees that and goes, oh, this is legitimate. So the more legitimacy it sees between websites referencing other websites, it sees that as relevant content and it helps your ranking. It's not necessarily all about ranking. It's more about specifically what people are looking for. Ranking's great to have, but I'm sure you've done a search before and something comes up at the top that's relevant to what you typed in, but not relevant to what you're looking for. So that's ranking is good, but then it might produce results that you're not looking for if the language isn't right and what language has been put into that site. So requesting backlinks to custom pages on your site, which have a lot of SEO content on there, or to particular galleries that you have on your site. Usually your homepage will have the most traffic because that is the entry point to your website through searching. Encouraging clients with websites and social media profiles to link to your website and or social profiles. And it's also helpful to network and leverage contacts you make while on a job. Passing out business cards, I guess, with your website and asking them to post about you, getting emails, but getting people to post your website and then referencing back to those people is great for backlinking. You can also consider a guest blog or an Instagram takeover. That's great for social media. If you're part of a social media group or a forum, to share your website or a link to your work with that audience. Adding a link to your site and your social media profiles is really helpful. One of the things that I see, which is helpful, and I have it myself, is this thing called Linktree. You can add that into your Instagram account, and basically when you click on the link in your Instagram, it has a drop down that can direct people to where you want them to go. So maybe you want them to go to your shop. Maybe you want them to go to your blog. Instagram doesn't really allow those things. Instagram wants you to stay on Instagram so that you give them advertising money. So LinkedIn's a great way to redirect traffic. Sorry, Linktree, pardon me. Consider a blog. So right now we're in the part of the discussion here called offsite SEO. So it's things that you're doing that are not on your main website. There's content that pertains, to IPTC and metadata. This is doing stuff out of your website to get traffic to your website. Some websites do have blogs. PhotoShelter is going to have one coming soon. We don't have one now, so we integrate WordPress. So Google sees blogs as Google loves blogs because there's a lot of word content. They prioritize content that's updated regularly. So that means a blog post and then a new blog post or an updated blog post. And new and relevant content in your blog can be backlinked to galleries and pages on your site. That's a really great thing to have in a blog, is links going from your blog to your site, which are considered two different sites. You're backlinking yourself. The more shareable your content on your blog, the more traffic you can bring to it, which can funnel into your photo shelter site. So making sure that you have icons that allow people to do a quick share, that's something that you want to have on there. A mobile-friendly site. Photo shelter templates have a blog integration for WordPress and Tumblr, which pulls a feed of content from your blog posts. Other companies may have that. Something you may be interested in. I don't know how bothered people are for clicking a link on a website that takes them somewhere else. But if you want that seamless look, a feed is nice to have. Setting up a Google business profile. We talked about that earlier about local algorithms. Google profile is free. It provides you with helpful analytics about visitors and search queries used to find you, and enabling you to make decisions that can enhance your local SEO. So somebody types in some words, it tells you how those people ended up here with those words. That's great, because that's stuff that you can add onto your website for getting traffic to your website. You can advertise services, products, and reviews. You have the ability to update citations, your name, your address, your phone number, and you should be responding to all reviews as it boosts your credibility. Social media. We talked a little bit about social media earlier, and Instagram, Pinterest. You want to make sure that you have social media icons on your website. That is standard. Most websites have it. You want to make sure they're working, because that helps bring people to your social media site so they can follow you and learn stuff more immediately, especially if you don't update your site that frequently. People might go to Instagram to see more content that's newer. It also helps to divert traffic back and forth. These are some use cases for social media and why they're important. The more common ones I see would be Facebook, Instagram, and Pinterest. Twitter, I would say if you're going to use Twitter, that might be like, hey, everybody, I'm teaching a class today. You can add images in there, but it's not the primary source that people use for imagery. Maybe memes, but not photography work. LinkedIn. So I see videographers using LinkedIn, or some people will use LinkedIn to point to some of the clients that they've worked with or some of the background they have if they're journalists. It's not as frequent, but LinkedIn also gets used. I mean, you're all familiar with Instagram, I'm sure, and Facebook, maybe not so much Pinterest. And I would encourage you to check out Pinterest, because Pinterest has an immense amount of traffic for images. How long will it take to see results? So if we look at this graph here, I don't think I remember what this website was, but it shows how traffic builds. So in 2017, this person had 733 people on their site. It was a new site through that month. So 24 people per day. And then in June, it went up to 1,095. Google initially did that crawl, and the increase from 733 to 1,095. That was a crawl that Google found without the index of the site. Then if we look in 2 months later, it has gone from 733 all the way to 2,885. That's after the sitemap was added. So that let Google know that these are the pages you want to crawl. Even though you've already seen these, this is everything. And then you can see it builds up from there. We have 424 more people by May of 2018 per day, and then 1,085 per day in May of 2019. And then 3 years later, starting from May 2017 to May 2020, see 85,580 people total. This is going to depend on the type of product you're selling, or how much work you put into your website. So I guess that's achievable depending on the type of work that you do. But this is just an example of how that traffic increased over time. And I want to say thank you very much for sitting through my presentation. And if you have any questions, feel free to send me a message, or yeah, send me a message.